Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to a very special presentation. On this evening, we are going to be doing an active shooter presentation. I am Pastor Tina Carragher of the First Seventh-day Adventist Church in Springfield, Tennessee. And I am not by myself. We have Pastor Chris Hughes coming to us all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, the New Life Seventh-day Adventist Church. Then we have Pastor Keenan West of the help us out.
South Nashville, have mercy. Have mercy.
Y'all forgive me, it's been a long day. South Nashville, Seventh-day Adventist Church. And of course, we have Officer Ken Scott on the line with us tonight. Wherever you are tuning in from, please let us know that you are tuning in. Make sure that you shout out what church you're from in the comment section. We want to see where you're at. Now, during this presentation, there are going to be things that may come to your mind, either ideas or questions that you have. I want to encourage you to make sure you put your comments in the comment section, because we will have time towards the closing part of the presentation where Officer Scott can answer your questions. So again, please make sure that you put them in the comment section in the chat, and we will be sure to respond to those questions. Pastor West, tell us why we are doing this.
Why are we doing this? What's interesting is that when we look over the last couple of months, especially over the last several years, we have seen an increase in the shootings that have taken place, especially in churches. As a matter of fact, I saw that there was a shooting in Iowa at an Iowa church today. Of course, we had the Buffalo shooting. Of course, that wasn't a church. We had the shooting in South Carolina. And so we see these shootings taking place. Of course, the Uvalde, Texas, and it's becoming more and more rampant. And this is actually, although it may seem as though it's becoming more and more rampant, which it is, this is really something that we should expect. The Bible tells us in Matthew 24 that as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the coming of the Son of Man. And when we go back to Genesis chapter 6, we see in Genesis chapter 6 some of the things that were taking place in the world during that time. We are reminded what was taking place. And the Bible says that the thoughts of men's hearts were only evil continually. And when you think about the fact that there are people going up into churches, there are people who are going up into schools and shooting people literally for no reason, it lets us know that we are living in the time of the end. In fact, in Revelation chapter 7, it talks about how the angels are holding back the winds of strife. And so here we see it's evident that the angels are beginning to let go of those winds, and we're seeing just rampant shootings, just all kinds of things that are happening on this earth. And so it is not our responsibility just to sit back and say it's going to happen, but it's our responsibility to be proactive. And so we are blessed today to be able to not look at the biblical perspective, but look at the practical perspective of what can we do to be proactive to make sure that we in our churches are prepared just in case an active shooter comes. And so I think that's kind of sets the stage and gives us a biblical background or scenario, a background, better yet, of why these things are happening.
Thank you, Pastor West. Pastor Hughes, can you tell us who our presenter is tonight?
Absolutely. Officer Kenneth Scott was born in Leesburg, Georgia, raised in Chi-Town, Chicago, Illinois, and is a product of the Seventh-day Adventist education system. He graduated from the Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Academy in Chicago, and then afterward attended the Oakwood College in Huntsville, Alabama. He's also a graduate of the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development School and is a certified special weapons and tactics operator. He's also currently serving as a regional security manager for a national wholesale grocery company, as well as the security director for the Southwest Region Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. He served as a chief of public safety for the Mercedes-Benz Superdome and the Smoothie King Center, home to the New Orleans Saints and the NBA Pelicans. and he currently sits on the board of directors for the Greater New Orleans Crime Stoppers organization. And he served as chief of police for the Federal Reserve, former chief of police for the Louisiana State University Medical Center Police Department. He has over 32 years of experience in law enforcement management and has served as chief of police for the Capitol Heights, Maryland Police Department, which is where he and I became friends. Chief of police for the Madison, South Dakota Police Department, and security director for the Federal Communications Commission in the DC area, as well as a security consultant for the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventist headquarters in Silver Spring, Maryland. It is an honor for him to be able to witness to others, and he is a firm believer in the text, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." I introduce to you Officer Kenneth Scott.
Can you open us up with prayer?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity, especially considering where we are in these last days on ways in which to handle the unthinkable. We appreciate and thank you for the wisdom, the guidance, the knowledge, and the understanding that you have given Officer Scott in the 32 years of experience that he has amassed over these past 3 decades. We thank you for the service that he has provided. And Lord, we're asking that you will speak through him this evening as he speaks to us on the important topic of active shooters.
Amen. Officer, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you all so very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you, speak to your church members, and to all of our friends from Facebook. It is a privilege and an honor to be invited here to address this very important subject matter. As Pastor Chris says, I know him as Chris, but as Pastor Hughes said, he and I go back a ways, and I've recently have become friends with Pastor Tina, who gave me the initial invitation to come on, and I definitely appreciate that. And Pastor Keenan and I, we just became fast friends about 5 minutes ago. If you all had heard the offline conversation, you would understand why I said that. We're going to become tight here in the next couple of months here. That's going to be my best buddy. So I do appreciate that the opportunity on a very needed subject and topic here. It's something that I am passionate about, the security, and it's something that I've become even more passionate about as I see things that are taking place in our nation. And when I say our nation, believe it or not, I do believe in biblical prophecy, but I also am one of the things that's striking is the United States is one of the only countries that is having this type of problem to this magnitude. I mean, no other country even comes close to having these type of terroristic and hatred acts that are going on right now. So what do I want to do? I want to give you some tools in your toolbox to how do we mitigate and make it through these trying times. And hopefully, if you can take just one or two smidges of things that I've said today and enact them at your church, hopefully it will help harden your structure and harden your security stance within your church. So with that being said, if you can begin with, there you go. That is a beautiful church there. Anyone who's on from my hometown will recognize that. I just had to put that up. That is the great Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Church in Chicago, the mother church for the Lake Region Conference. That is my home church. Just had to put a plug out there for the incoming pastor, Pastor John Boston there. So we can go to the next slide, please. So let's talk about what is an active shooter. We hear it all the time and increasingly more and more. So let's just get what is the FBI's definition is one or more individuals actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. A mass shooting. We hear about that all the time. Well, one of the mass shootings that we've had that was recent was in Las Vegas. When there was a man got up in one of the hotels while they were having a concert, and he broke out one of the windows and just started shooting people randomly. That's an incident where a firearm's used to kill 4 or more people. The stunning fact that stands out to me was last year, there were 61 active shooter incidents with over 100 people dying. However, as of day number 145 of this year, there have been 213 mass shootings. This is what, June 4th? 213. So you do the math on that. We are going to be well over possibly 600-700 by the end of the year. That is very telling. Of all of the mass shootings that we've had recently, the ones that really stand out with, of course, is the one we just had last week in Texas with the children. The mindset has always been, well, these people are crazy. They have a mental deficiency. Well, that is really not the case when it comes to FBI when they profile these people. And profiling them, most of these attacks are very well thought out. These attacks are people have spent a lot of money. They've found out where they can purchase the weapons, where they can purchase the ammunition, the body armor, how they can get into these different schools and churches and different places and what to do. So we can all put it off to a madman, although the behavior is mad. Putting it off to a person who has mental instabilities, we can't do that anymore. We actually have to look and say, what is behind this? What is something that is setting these people off to go and decide to take lives? Next slide, please. So we just talked about this. Pastor Keenan mentioned some of these. I'm going to go through some real quick. Ames, Iowa. Man kills 2 women, then himself in a church parking lot. We had the Racine, Wisconsin, where a man shoots and wounds 2 people at a cemetery. We had the Orange County, California, where a man entered a church. He kills 1 person and he shoots 6 others. These 3, the interesting part about these 3, these all have occurred within the last week and a half. The last week and a half. Charleston, South Carolina. They invited this gentleman, who's a Caucasian gentleman, to a historical Black church. He sits there and he worships with them. They have a prayer over him. The pastor is there. He purposely sits next to the pastor. And then with the hatred in his heart, he stands up and he tells people the reason why he is going to be shooting and killing them. He actually allows some to survive. And he tells her, I want you to survive because I want you to go and tell the story of why this happened and why I've killed the people in here. Takes the gun and puts it to his head, pulls the trigger, and the gun does not fire because he's run out of bullets. Other than that, he would have killed himself. However, he was, as everyone knows, he was arrested the next day. And I believe he's the one who was actually given some Burger King in that incident, which in my mind, even from a law enforcement perspective, I'm sure I have some of my officer friends on here, that is something that is unthinkable. Just the image of me stopping at a Burger King and getting a double Whopper with cheese for a killer is unthinkable and unimaginable. So it kind of goes to where we have a thought process. Are the people who commit these and they're white, do they get away with better treatment? It opens a whole nother line of questioning. I'm not going to go into right now, but it opens up a whole, I'm sure Pastor Keenan can appreciate that. I see him smiling, but it just goes to the mindset of how we treat people who do these type of things differently than some people of color who have been treated doing far less. Sutherland Springs, Texas. The man's entered a church. He wounds 22 and he kills 26, including himself. That was the largest killing at a church in our nation. 26 people and he wounded 22. Then he kills himself. I want you to do something for a second for me. Everyone who is currently watching us online, when I tell you to, I want you to close your eyes. And when I tell you to close your eyes, I'm going to have you close them for a while. And when I tell you to open them, I want you to open them immediately. Okay? So here are the instructions. Close your eyes when I count to 3. And when I tell you to open them, open your eyes. Okay, here we go. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Close your eyes. Open your eyes. In White Settlement, Texas, a man attended several church services. He stands up during the service and he shoots 2 security team members before being shot and killed by a firearms expert attending the service. That was 6 seconds that you closed your eyes. Those 3 killings happened in 6 seconds.
Wow.
Think about that. 6 seconds. 3 people were killed. Now, the saying among the NRA and a lot of police agencies is the only thing that's going to stop a bad man with a gun is a good man with a gun. Well, there is some truth to that, 100%. This was one incident that happened. The man came in. It was in Texas. He was not dressed appropriately for church. He had on a large coat. He had a shotgun underneath his jacket. This was not the first time he had attended the service. He had sat in the service, listened to all of the worship service, and still stood up, pulled out a shotgun, shot 2 of the security team members. They actually pulled their weapons as well, but he had the drop on them, killed them. The head of the security team, who was a firearms instructor, within that 6 seconds saw what was happening, and he shot him 1 time, 1 well-placed round to the head. And please don't think that I'm being crass when I say this. However, he did stop a lot of people probably from being killed. 1 well-placed round stopped the threat. And you'll understand why I say this and why I bring up about armed security team members as we go through the presentation. I will have to say this, and I've been in law enforcement 32 years. I will say this. It is not a pretty profession. Some of the things that have to be done in profession, some of the things that are done, it's not pretty. So please, for those who are kind of queasy, or if you have young children on here, there's not going to be anything visual, but as I talk, some of the visuals that I give out might be startling to some who don't have the temperament. Okay, so if we can go to the next one, please. So what are some of the barriers to adequate church security? All right, here's some that I've come up with. I'm sure there are plenty more. Churches spend more time, resources, and money preparing the choir than they do on security concerns. Mercy, mercy, mercy. When you think about that, okay, it is something that is troubling. Oftentimes, security is a last-minute add-on to most events. I have been handling security here recently for our camp meeting that we're going to have week after next in Tyler, Texas, for the Southwest Region Conference. One of the things that I can appreciate about our new leader, Dr. Bird, and my former classmate, Philip Palmer, who's a treasurer there, is I have been involved from a security perspective from the time that this has been planned. I can appreciate that. And I want you, there's a takeaway from that. As you're planning your events, your church events, your camp meetings, your crusades, security needs to be the priority. It does not need to be something that's a second thought, or something that we say, well, yeah, we can get around to it, or we can have the deacons do it. Okay? Church security is often overseen by untrained and ill-prepared individuals, deacons, elders, etc. I can remember in the Allegheny East Conference, and this is no knock on them, this is just what happened. And unfortunately, I'm sort of like my mother was. If I was sick and she had cod liver oil, it's like, here, open your mouth and take it. All right. So please don't take this to my takeaway when I mentioned Allegheny East is they used to have a pastor who was over security at Pine Forge when they had camp meeting. Well, in my mind, being a law enforcement professional, and this is what I did, I always questioned that. Why would you have a pastor who has been trained in pastoral ministries and has possibly a PhD and doctor, ministry? Why would you put someone who that doesn't do this on a regular basis in charge of security for such a large event? People coming from all over the place, open campus. We need to make sure we put the round peg in the round hole when it comes to who's going to be leading out in our security. Church leaders often have the mindset that it would never happen at my church. Thus, the lack of preparation and foresight of action to be taken if an incident occurs. Growing up as a Seventh-day Adventist, and I grew up in the church. I think I gave new meaning to growing up in the church. I lived in the right next door to the school. I lived in the parsonage, which was right next door to the church. My father was a custodian at the church. My sister taught and she retired as a principal of the church school there, Shiloh Academy. I was always at a church all the time. And I remember growing up that we always used to have the mindset that God will take care of us. And we always preach that. Pastors, we always preach it, as you should, because I believe that he does have a fence around us. Absolutely. But just like with doctors, God also gives us common sense. And he trains people for such a time as this, for when we have issues. So that as leaders, for those leaders who are on, whether my security team leaders or whatever, we can never have that mindset that it will never happen at my church. The 3 events that happened this past week, you never would have thought that they would have happened. Here in Louisiana, over the last 2 weeks, at Xavier University and Southern University, they had high school graduations on campus, and they had shooters drive past and shoot and kill people. An 80-year-old grandmother was killed here in New Orleans last week at Xavier University at a drive-by shooting for a high school graduation. Who would have thought, as that grandma was getting prepared, that she would face death that day, go into a high school graduation? Never have that attitude. It will never happen at my church. Next slide, please. Here is the overwhelming question that we have. Is your church safe? Pastors, deacons, elders, put them aside. Members that go to church, is your church safe? When you walk into that building to worship, are you concerned that you might not walk out of that building? Is that a concern of yours? Is it an overriding concern of yours? Should it be a concern of yours? My answer to all of those questions is a resounding yes. You should always know. And look, they proved in New York last week that it is tough going to a grocery store to get your groceries. Who would think that you could walk in a Walmart or a Hy-Vee or a store, a Kroger, and not walk out? No one would have thought that. Is your church safe? Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the things and ask you, and I want you to take notes, mental notes, if you're not taking physical notes, about some of these things that can assist you with your church. Does your church have a documented security plan? Now, why would you need that? If there is an incident at your church, you better believe that there are going to be some lawsuits coming down. Have you done your due diligence in your churches for church leaders, but not only for church leaders, for church members to go to your church leaders and press them to make sure they have these? Because there will be some litigation. And if you have to come and say, were you prepared? Did you have a plan of action if something happened within your church? If you sit there like a lump on a log and say, no, I did not, you better believe that whatever monies that were requested are probably going to be awarded. Okay, so we have to cover ourselves with that. Most of us are covered under Adventist Risk Management insurance, and I think it's one of the things that the conference has put in place. I know that the conference there where you all pastor, the three pastors that are on here, they have something called a safety Sabbath. And I believe it's every fifth Sabbath, if I'm not mistaken, or something along those lines. This is a perfect time for you to do some of the things that I'm going to address here going forward. If your conference does not have the safety Sabbath, it's something that you might want to put in place. Or not even for people that are not even Seventh-day Adventists that are watching, your church once a quarter needs to have a safety Sabbath or safety Sunday or safety moment or safety minute within your church. Does your church have a well-trained security team? Well-trained. One of the things when I do this in person, I always talk about us having as the security lead, the elderly gentleman who was a police officer back in the 70s, who's drawing his weapon looking like Otis, as he, y'all don't know about who Otis is, but anyway, looking like Otis, coming out the holster, and hasn't drawn that weapon in 10 years. All right. Those skills are perishable. We need someone who is well-trained and capable. Then we talk about armed versus unarmed. Pastor Tina, I know you were at Oakwood, and I know that Oakwood University has a very well-trained armed security team. So it's something that in our conference that we had to look at. A couple of years, we put together a manual, and we talked about armed versus unarmed. There are some pros and cons to both of this. Some of the pros are you have someone right there who can readily address the threat, not doing what they did in Texas, where you sit back for whatever reason they did and wait to go in and stop the threat. You have someone right there versus waiting on the police to come in and do their thing. Also, the cons to that is if the police come into my facility, they don't know me. They'll just see a man holding a gun. And I might take one for the team, unfortunately. So those are some of the things that as pastors you have to think about. Do you want armed security? Do you want unarmed security team? Does your church have effective communication ability? The church here, Ephesus in New Orleans, a couple of years ago, I did a presentation there for church security. And they went out and they purchased, it's a mother church here, and they purchased radios. And they still use them to this day so that if someone is inside or someone is outside, they can communicate effectively, letting them know, hey, I have someone coming to church. He looks a little, he doesn't look quite right. Please keep an eye on him. Okay. Does your church have frequent fire or safety drills? I can guarantee you that if I took a poll, 90% of people on here probably say that they don't. When was the last time that you went to church and there was a fire drill at church? There's a church in Greenwood, Mississippi that I've gone to the last few years. Pastor Sean is the pastor there. I'm sure you all know her. And we hold a fire drill. Every time I go there to speak, we hold a fire drill. After I get through speaking for 11 o'clock service, they know, don't leave, don't get up. We about to have a fire drill. All right. And in having that fire drill, your people in your church need to know, where do we go? Where do we rally after a fire drill? Where do we rally after an intruder drill? Where do we go? We leave the church. Do we just scatter? Where do we rally? So we're going to take a head count of everyone. When we have safety drills in your church, what do you do for your elderly? What do you do for your handicapped? How do they get out? Is someone designated to get them out of the church and make sure they get out as well? These are some of the things that I want you all to start thinking about in your church when you go back to your churches next week or possibly this week. These are some notes that you should be taking and some of the things that you should probably be looking at in your church. Are you prepared? Is your church safe? Next slide, please. I put together some critical components of church security. Okay. You should establish a security presence. There is a church in Texas. I can't remember the name of it. It's online. They have probably one of the most comprehensive security programs I've ever seen. It entails access control. It entails closed circuit televisions. It entails armed security as well. If I went to that church, I don't think I would have a care in the world when I sat down there to listen to the pastor. I would sit there just as calm because I know that the church has done their due diligence in ensuring that I am safe. So a security presence. It is critical that your place of worship forms a security team that is constantly working to prevent and prepare for the invasion of an armed intruder. Ideally, your security team should be filled with trained individuals such as law enforcement officers, federal and state police, military personnel, firefighters, and emergency workers. Now, smaller churches, you might only have 1 or 2 people, but those 1 or 2 people need to be trained. Also, they need to be faithful. What do I mean by faithful? Put people on your security team that you know is going to show up for church. All right? Not the ones that not your infrequent visitors that show up every so often, but you need the ones that are going to be faithfully show up. Next slide, please. Secure your place of worship. You should assess the structural security of your place of worship. What does that mean? You need to look at it. And Pastor Tina, I'm going to use your church because we used your church here recently. When we go around at her door, her front door to her church, unless you're 6'2" or above, my height or above, you cannot look out of the front door of her church to see who's coming to her church. Okay. So someone her size, if the pastor, she's there, and I'm not sure what your height is, 5'4", 5'5", Pastor Tina, you cannot look out of the door and see who's coming into your church. So structurally, there need to be a change there? And she knows this because we talked about it with her and the elder who was there. Yes, structurally, that needs to change. There was and I know she's going to get me for this. She has a ringtone system on her church. Okay. And this is part of the structure. There's a ringtone on her where it rings and it goes someplace. We still haven't figured out where it goes on her church, but that's okay. That's why we do these. That's why they do these assessments. I was able to walk up and pull the ring. It was Velcro to the building. And then I hit the button to ring it and it just rang. We don't know who answered. It could have been anybody. All right. We don't know. So, and don't take this wrong. I'm sure she not, because we've talked about this at length. It was there when she got there. So she found it there. But we need to look at those type of things. One of the great things she had there that someone had put up is, as part of the ringtone, she had lights. It's a ring system that has lights attached to it. So when you walk up to the door, the lights automatically pop on. These are some of the things you need to look at. Do you have bushes that are high that go all the way around your church that someone can hide in your church? Do you have that? Structurally, within your church, locking systems on your doors. Are you able to lock your sanctuary and lock your sanctuary down if someone's in the lobby acting a nut? Can you lock your sanctuary down so no one can get in there? These are some of the things that you need to think about or start thinking about. Decisions must be made regarding convenience and safety. Okay, you have 3 or 4 entrances to your church. One of your entrances is easier to get into. However, if you had it open, you're not able to maintain it. You're not able to monitor it. If I lock it, some people are going to say, "Oh, I have to walk all the way around the building now." Well, yes, you do. You have a little inconvenience is worth people's safety. So please never ever give in to that convenience. Always maintain a security versus convenience. That should be the top, not the bottom. Can entry points be limited to allow better monitoring by the security team? Just talked about that. Are late arrivals met and guided or escorted to the appropriate area? Every church, I don't care what size your church is, when I step out of that parking lot of my car, in that parking lot, someone should have eyes on me all the way up to greet me at the door when I enter the church. Seventh-day Adventists have the best greeting in the world. It was made, I believe, probably in the 70s. I believe that's when I first heard it. And look, you don't have to carry a conversation. All you have to say is what? Happy Sabbath. And look people in the eye. Happy Sabbath. Everyone who walks in that door or gets out of that in that parking lot should be greeted with a happy Sabbath. I'm saying happy Sabbath. Not only am I saying happy Sabbath, but I'm probably looking you up and down. I'm checking you out. And if my and I've always said I've had a spidey sense in 32 years of law enforcement. If my spidey sense or your spidey sense goes off that something is not right, you need to follow through with that. All right. Greet everyone who comes into your sanctuary, not just at 11 o'clock, but you need to go all the way through, have someone there to greet all the way through the service for late arrivals. These type of vulnerabilities and how they are addressed can be the difference between quickly identifying a threat or the opportunity an armed intruder needs to cause destruction and chaos. Next slide, please. We talked about this. Post greeters at all entrances. If you have certain entrances that can be locked, lock them. It is best to have people come into one entrance in your church. There's some large churches like the church I grew up in, Shiloh. I can think of I can think of 4 ways on a Sabbath when I was growing up so someone can get into the church. So now when I go back and I look, there's only one way now, the front doors into the church. Posting greeters at the main entrance of your church is not only a friendly gesture and newcomers in your congregation, but it's a great tactic for identifying potential threats. One of the things about churches that makes them very vulnerable, you want people to feel welcome. Everybody coming to your church, welcome. Charleston, South Carolina, I guarantee you they made that fool, and I use that with all the love in my heart, they made that fool feel welcome. That young man sat there and they worshiped and prayed with him because it's a church. That's what they do. They had Christ in their heart. Come into our church. The church in Texas, where the man, he had worshiped there several times. The man who ended up killing him said that he noticed him walking in and he kept eyes on him because of the way that he was dressed. But did they turn him away? Not at all, because it's a church. We don't do that. We don't turn people away at a church. Now, if you come into church and you start acting a fool, most states that we have are common law states. What does that mean? Anybody in that church can stop and drag somebody out of that church if they start acting a nut or have strange behavior. Okay? Now, strange behavior to some can be a little different. That just be just the way they are, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when they start getting loud in church or displaying, just behavior that you feel could be threatening. Okay. With proper training, your greeters can identify odd or threatening behavior. Just talked about that. These abnormal behaviors can then be relayed to your security team. This information may just allow your security team to prevent or quickly address any threats they may have. Next slide, please. Checklist. Let's go through this very quickly. I'm working on 42 minutes, but we're going to get through this. Do parking lots have adequate lighting for night or evening services? Your Wednesday night service, your choir practice. Your choir practice where you have the three sopranos, 16 altos, and 2 tenors. All right. Do you have adequate lighting for those type of things? Are your team members monitoring parking lots before during service? Are team members monitoring the congregation during critical moments in the service? Intercessory prayer. What's everyone doing intercessory prayer supposed to be doing? Not on their phone. So they're supposed to have their eyes closed. Okay. During the offering. How do you take up your offering in your church? The church here that I've done presentations, they take up their offering. They start at the back of the church and they work their way forward. Some churches have even gone the Baptist style where you get up and you walk up to the front, put your stuff in, and then you sit back down. If you do have an intercessory prayer, do you have a deacon that is up on the rostrum or a deacon at the front of the church who's looking out with his eyes open at the congregation to make sure nothing is happening while everyone is up front or everyone has their eyes closed? Are all entrances monitored? We talked about that. Lock staff, or is there ring capability within there? Does your church have a regular fire intruder drills with designated rally points? Talked about that as well. Next slide, please. Checklist. Are security team members present for all worship services? Talked about that. Your board meetings, evangelistic crusades. Do you have a security plan? Do you have designated security team members? Has your security team leader or pastor met with local emergency service personnel? Have they met with the local police to say, invite them into your facility and say, hey, how are you doing? Meet with the local, and when I say local police, it's good to meet with the chief, the commanders, the captains, but meet with those sergeants and whatever officers are designated for your area. Invite them into your facility. One of the things that as police, yeah, y'all say we like donuts, but we like food too. You give us a meal. Now, I'm not talking about, I know churches, I'm not talking about no chocolates. Give them a meal that got some parents to it, with some little chicken, a little steak or something, invite them in there, and feed them and get to know them on a personal basis. Have a law enforcement appreciation day or emergency appreciation day at your church. Invite the paramedics or firefighters, the police, the sheriffs who handle your area into your church. Get to know them. Give them a tour of your church so they will have an idea if they ever have to respond for whatever reason, what your church looks like. Is there a written security plan, which includes protocols for fire, intruder, or weather events? Haven't touched on weather events, but a lot of churches are in Tornado Alley. A lot of churches have hurricanes, bad weather tornadoes that come through. Do you have a plan? What are you going to do if the tornado siren goes off near your church? Are all exit doors clearly marked and have diagrams with explicit exiting instructions? So above every door that you can get out of that church should have an exit sign. Down below where a person can read it, even a person who's in a wheelchair, it should have a diagram of how to get out of that church. So you walk out of the sanctuary, you make a right. It should be diagrammed, all right, in red, something that stands out with arrows of how you exit that church. Also, one of the things that I would put together for you and have it on your phone, because you're going to know when you leave, if something happens, you leave out, you're probably going to take your phone for the police, have a diagram of your church on your phone. Because if the police get there instead of a command post because something ignorant is happening at your church, then you will be able to show them this is a diagram of my church and what it looks like on the inside. Gives them a heads up and you can, hey, this is the person that's in the church. This is the last place I saw them. They were in the basement or they were in the back room. Here's a diagram of the church. This is the last place I saw them. It will help them greatly. Next slide. Active shooter response. What do I do? Now the person's got in there and they're an active, not even shooter, but could be active shooter, active threat. They can have a gun or a knife. What do I do? Well, the three things that everyone talks about: run, hide, fight. Run. What do I mean by run? Oh, sorry, something came. Run. You need to get out of there as fast as you can. Get away from the threat. Okay? Hide. When you go to church this coming weekend, whether it's tomorrow, next Sabbath, or following Sunday, when you go to church, I want you to look and think, if something happened, if someone came in behind me, where would I go to hide? If someone came up, the threat was in front of me, where in this church would I hide? Most places in the church, the only place you have to hide is in that pew. Look, I'm 6'2", 205 pounds. I would make myself probably into a 3-foot midget if I had to hide and somebody was capping off rounds, okay? I want you to think about that now. Where would I hide? Where could my elderly hide? Where could the people in a wheelchair who come to my church or who have a physical handicap, what do we do with them? Start thinking, get creative with them. Do I hide behind the piano? Do I hide up on the choir loft? Then we talk about fight. The incident in California where the man drove from Las Vegas and came in and killed the man and the doctor. The doctor there who was killed, he actually went and attacked the shooter. He was killed. He died, but he saved lives. Once he attacked the shooter shot him. Others within the congregation jumped on him. They took belts and string and they tied him together for the police to get there. All right? Run, hide, fight. These are some of the things that you should preach as you do your presentations, however you're going to have them in your church, your safety Sabbaths, your safety moments within your church. This is the criteria. This is the model that everyone teaches, and it should be adhered to. Run, hide, and fight. Next slide, please. All right. So I went over just a couple of minutes. Well, actually, I had to play. I blame that on the pastors. 48 minutes and 36 seconds. I think we're doing well. However, so I wanted to get a little feedback. I don't know if anything was put into the chat. Pastor Tina, was anything put in chat, or pastors, do you all have any questions for me as well?
Yes, I'll actually start with some of the questions that came. There's 2 questions so far in the chat. The first question came from Tony Hughes. She says, what type of armed security should our churches have?
So that is an excellent question. So when you say type, I guess it probably referencing spray or tasers or a firearm. I guess I'm just going to assume that that's what it is. And Pastor Chris, I guess that's your significant other who asked that. Can you just give a thumbs up if that's what she's referring to?
She's outside of the house right now, but I do believe that's what she's referring to.
Great. I think any of those 3 would work, and either slow down the threat. But if you want to neutralize the threat thoroughly, it would be armed. However, if you feel that a stun gun or a taser, if you don't want to go, if your church doesn't want to go to the level of actually having someone with a firearm within the church, then yeah, I would definitely look at that as well. There's pepper spray that can be used. You can purchase pepper spray. So someone, you get a good dose of pepper spray in your face, that's going to at least slow that shooter down. Hopefully people can get out, out of the kill zone or the zone of that shooter. Absolutely.
All right. Before I move to the next question, I just want to state for the record, since you brought it up, I am 5'1".
As little kids say, that's even worse. Okay.
my confidence makes me 5'5", but yes, I am 5'1". I am short. I cannot see out the. Anyways, moving on to the question number 2. Who should a lay person bring these questions to in church? Pastor, head elder, who?
That's a great question, Cynthia. Glad to see you on. Cynthia and I go back to elementary school. Glad to see you on. All 3. And why do I say that? Because there are some people who are still going to live in some unrealistic world where they're not going to take the security seriously. So I would address the pastor, the head elder, and the head deacon. Normally, the head deacon is tasked with providing security at most churches. Just by virtue of they do everything else. Normally, their maintenance in the facility, making sure the snow is plowed and things like that. When the toilet overruns, the deacon handles that. So normally in most churches, I've served as the head deacon in Bladensburg, and security, that was part of my responsibilities as well. I would address all 3. And out of all 3, hopefully at least one of them, if not all of them, will address your concerns or the security at the church.
Okay. Another question that came up: how should church security team best work with a uniformed officer on site?
Oh, excellent question. Excellent question. So a lot of churches do hire deputies. First Church in Huntsville, they hire a deputy. If you go to your church, you'll see a deputy sitting outside in the parking lot. So if you have an armed security team, and you, as well as having a deputy outside, there needs to be some identifiers on your armed security team. What do I mean by identifiers? They need to have, if they have a suit on, they need to have maybe a pin, a lapel pin that identifies them as law enforcement. That deputy, whatever deputy is assigned to work that detail at that church, needs to know everyone in that church who is armed. So you do not want to have what we call a blue on blue incident, a good guy versus the police incident where the police come in and shoot the good guy. You don't want to have that. So that's how they need to work in conjunction. That deputy needs to know we have an armed security team on the inside, and here they are, and introduce them. Don't just say, oh, he's a tall, light-skinned guy over there or whatever. No, face-to-face introductions prior to them going on duty. And then also there needs to be a communications. If you have an armed security team at your church, every one of those armed people need to have a radio. Also, you need to have a radio for that person, that deputy who is outside as well. If you have an unarmed security team, that deputy needs to have a radio so he can communicate, or at least cell phone numbers, so they can communicate. If something going on outside or inside, that communication can take place between those two entities.
Okay. What is the ratio of security person per members is recommended, if any?
You're stumping me on that one. I am not sure, but it needs to be so. It needs to be representative. And I believe I have a representative from Oakwood University security team on. Julian, if you're on, you might be able to put that into the chat. I know Oakwood has an armed security team. I'm not sure what the ratio is, but it probably needs to be consistent with what your membership is. Your smaller churches, you have 20, 30 members, you don't need 10 armed security people there at your church. If you had it, maybe great. You could put one in each pew, one for each family. They can have their own private security personnel. But I am not sure what the exact ratio should be, but it probably goes along with what a reasonable person would have. So if you have 300, 400 people at your church, you probably need to have 4 or 5 armed people throughout that congregation in order to neutralize any threat.
Okay. Should there be security that people don't know are security, like on planes?
That is an excellent question. Hello, Charmaine. How are you? Another one of my childhood friends. Good to see. That question is something the church probably needs to address. I always believe that people are going to attack places that they think they can get away with something. Mm-hmm. So and it's going to be the least resistance. My train of thought has been, I want people to know that there's going to be some resistance if you come to my church. If you come in my church, you're going to know that there's somebody going to be there that's going to have a weapon. So if I pull out a weapon, someone is going to be there in order to meet that force with force. So I always thought it's good to know people to put it out there versus having someone come in and start doing something, then find out, yeah, we have someone who is armed. So let the word get out. Oakwood University, the word is out. You go there acting crazy, you're going to be met with some type of force.
Next question. How can we assess a potential threat without making the visitor feel judged or like a criminal?
Yeah, that's a tough one. At Caffin Avenue Church, I was an elder there, and there was a man who came to church just about every Sabbath. And I'm not sure if I have any the members that attended there a while back. And he was a white guy, and he came to church every Sabbath with a backpack on, not dressed in a suit or anything. And he would sit in the back of the church, the very last pew of the church, with a backpack on and keep the backpack on. And I'm going to tell you, initially, I probably made him feel a bit uncomfortable. I expressed my concerns to the pastor as well. But if he came into the church, my position in that church was at the back door directly behind him, because I felt it was my duty, someone's duty, to keep an eyes on. Now, that man came probably for a few years. After a while, did I relax? Absolutely. He came there for the word. He didn't look like he was there for the word. He presented everything, and my spidey sense went off about him. A white gentleman at a black church, not really dressed really well at all, with a backpack on. It doesn't get the threat level doesn't get any greater than that in my mind for someone who's there probably not to do anything good. And so it's a fine line that you walk there. You can actually observe someone without invading their personal space or making them feel bad. Look, that's one thing that we how many people remember before pre-COVID in your church, or when everyone got up and you walked around and you greeted people? And you walked around and you sang Happy Sabbath and all that, and you shook hands and you hugged people. Hey, in my mind, that was a great way. That way, everybody in that church on the left side of that church has seen me, because they got up and they greeted me. And now that we had the COVID, a little tougher to do. But you can keep eyes on someone, even the pastor from the pulpit. You are one of the main people, because you are sitting there watching the congregation. Lately, a lot of times, if you notice, there's no one else up on the pulpit but you. Used to be a time when you had all the elders set behind you, in your amen corner, boosting you and all that. You can say any old thing. Jesus wept, and everybody, amen, amen, behind you. Nowadays, it don't work like that anymore. The choir and everybody else. So, you're the only one standing there who's looking out. So the pastor, you play a very important part in identifying people who don't look right. And look, there is nothing wrong with, you motioning to your deacon while doing your sermon or whatever and say, excuse me, and whispering something in his ear. Make sure you don't have the mic sticking on your shirt, but whispering something in his ear, say, please keep an eye on, left front, right, second pew, whatever. And then he sit on back down.
Amen. No hot mic moments. All right. The
No.
next question. Should a hired uniformed officer carry a rifle versus a handgun?
I believe they should it should be available probably in their trunk, a long gun. Nowadays, most agencies, the deputies and the police officers carry long guns in their trunks.
Okay.
You got to meet the force with force.
Okay. Okay, this is an interesting question. What do we do when there is limited males in the church and more mature women than most?
And you know, if I've done this, please forgive me. I probably have referenced a lot of males, security team members. Look, there are ladies in the church. Look, I'll tell you this. I've worked with some people on agencies where I've been a chief. I would rather go into a fight with some of the females than some of the men. Now, I'm just putting it out there. Women don't play. They're not going to play with you. They're not going to toy with you. They're not going to put up their fist to fight you. All right. They're going to go to whatever level they need to stop that threat. Okay. So there are some women, if they are capable of assuming roles absolutely on a security team, being the head of the security team, I have no issue with that one at all. Most churches, if you look nowadays, you look in the congregation, you see majority of females. Now, is that something that us males who are in the church need to address? Getting some more men to come to church? Absolutely. But women can serve in those roles as well if there are limited males. However, if I'm a male and I'm going to church and I know that there are limited females, I need to step up. I need to step my male game up. Because as men, we are protectors, or should be. Now, if you don't want to fit that role, maybe you need to go someplace else and worship. I'm sorry, I didn't say that out loud.
Mercy, we got some extra Steve Harvey advice on here tonight.
Please forgive me.
Next question. Would you advise quarterly training for elders and deacons?
Absolutely. Security is an ever-evolving thing. Some of the skills are perishable, especially if you have people who have firearms. Those skills are perishable. They should be training in de-escalation techniques. I know that a lot of pastors and elders are trained as counselors as well, how to talk a person off the ledge. I'm sure there are probably times when a person's been able to speak to someone and say, hey, you really don't want to do that. Let's talk about it. What is the problem? Let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Put your weapon away or whatever. I remember, so growing up, I grew up in a parsonage next to Shiloh. My dad was the first elder there. I remember there was one night that a gentleman came to our house and he had a gun. And I remember listening to my father. I was upstairs in the parsonage. I remember, and I was scared. And I remember listening to my father talk to this guy. And the guy was a really large guy. My father was smaller. And he actually talked him into the man handing the gun over to my father. So it can be done. It can be done, but it needs to be something that is a training. Quarterly training is something that should be on the calendar, and it should be mandatory. If you accept this position as a deacon and elder, we're going to have mandatory training going forward. Mandatory doesn't mean I stubbed my toe, I can't make it. Well, that's fine. We're going to put you on a Zoom. There are a whole lot of platforms for people who are sick and shut in to attend training as well. Absolutely.
All right, last question, and then I'll open the floor to the pastors. Since churches are opening up now, could the attendance be low because of the violence that is also happening? How can we get the members involved to understand this is a serious matter for our churches and need the support of the members?
When you put your security plan in place, make it known. Tell everyone, this is what we have done. We have instituted a safety service where part of our service is going to be geared toward our safety and security at our church. We have put a security plan together. We have undergone training, bring in people such as myself and others for training. That gives them a confidence that they say, this is just not lip service. These are things that we are doing that I can see when I come to church. I step out in that parking lot, there's somebody who was waving at me, who's standing up there watching me from the time I get out my car. Not only that, there are people that are watching me enter the service, make sure I get in my car. Okay? That will put a person's mind at ease. And look, I can go to my church and I will feel comfortable in my church versus, and like I said, make it known, make it public. This is the things that we have done and make it part of your service to sit there and don't do it pre-service, do it during the service when everyone is there and highlight everything up on the screen that we have done to address security concerns at our church. Make a person, give them that comfort level.
Mhm.
Let them know if you feel unsafe, you need to pull a deacon or an elder aside and tell me why you feel unsafe. I'm unsafe because the gentleman in the back, he has a bulge on his right-hand side, and I saw the bottom of a gun sticking out. I saw a bulge sticking out the back of his jacket. I'm not sure what it is. He could be an off-duty police officer, of course. I'm not sure what it is, but can someone please keep an eye on him?
Mhm.
That will make people feel more comfortable as they slowly return to church.
Now, before I open, now some people are wondering, Officer Scott, how can we get you to come to our church and do a safety presentation? What is the best way to get in contact with you?
So I do have an email address. I don't know if you're capable to.
Mhm.
Can you put anything up on the screen? If you put the it's bigcat406 at yahoo.com, BIGCAPT 406 at yahoo.com, and my telephone number, and I didn't do my homework yesterday, Pastor Tina. You know what I'm talking about on that.
Yes.
My telephone number is 504 428-9976.
All right.
One
So
more
if y'all want to get in contact with Officer Scott, this is how we are doing.
Hey, Pastor Tina, put a T at the end of that cap. CAPT.
Okay.
BIGCAPT
Got it.
406 at yahoo.com. And my telephone number is 504-428-9976. I am available on the weekends. I do travel a lot, as the people who know me know. I'm all over the place, all the time. But if you reach out to me, I'll be more happy to do either a Zoom or an in-person presentation for you at your church. And I will tell you, this has been actually, this is my first time doing this type of presentation. I do other presentations about police relations on Zoom, but doing one security is this is the first time I've done one on this type of platform. And so for me, that's why I asked the pastor, could they stay on so I could feel like I'm talking to somebody. I appreciate them staying on with their faces and giving me some sort of feedback as we're going through these presentations. But I'm available. And I tell people always ask, well, what do you charge? What is your fee? So I'm pretty cheap. I tell it, whatever you give, whatever honorarium you give to your pastors when they come and preach for you, that's what I do too. I like ramen noodles, but I don't like ramen noodles every day. Okay, so help a brother out. If you get me there, and look, you got to feed me. Now I always put this out there. I don't know if Pastor Sean is on here. When I go to Greenwood, Mississippi, when I say eating good, if y'all have never been there, you all need to go. Pastor Sean needs to invite you all there. And when I say they put on a spread, oh my goodness! So feed me, get me there, feed me, give me a place to sleep. And I'm yours.
Amen. Pastor West, Pastor Hughes, do you have any final thoughts or questions that you'd like to ask?
A couple of questions, actually. One, do you have a type of template that can be used in terms of you put up some of the things in your PowerPoint, but something that we can use to kind of walk through a check, as a check mark, just to identify the things that we have that are missing security wise. Sure. And then number two, what are your recommendations for a small church as it relates to security? They may be challenged financially speaking.
Sure. So the first question, what I will share with you, if you email me, I will share with you the church security manual that I put together for Southwest Region Conference.
Okay.
In there, it talks about armed versus unarmed. It talks about a lot of things that I talked about today, and it sort of shares a template of what a security program, a comprehensive security program, looks like. Okay. So if you email me, I will share that with you. The second, your question. So there are a lot of things that are financially neutral or somewhat neutral that you can do at a small church, such as putting people out in strategic places, making sure that when I went through the church there in Nashville, one of the things I noticed that church has like a lot of doors, probably 15 doors in there, a lot of places for people to hide. Making sure those doors are locked during the service, making sure someone at the end of service is tasked with going through your small church and making sure that the church is empty, the restrooms, all of that is empty. Putting up the ring. The ring, I think that is one of the best inventions that they've had. A lot of our schools are going to that within our conference here as well. The ring is something that you can sit there and monitor who is actually coming into your church on your cell phone. And you can see people coming and leaving as well. So the ring with the lights, the motion sensors, it's a combined system. And it's not that expensive. I believe those are probably, $100, $150 or so. So when I say financial neutral, I'm not talking about something that's, in the thousands or whatever.
Right.
I'm speaking of something, low hundreds that you can do to definitely harden your facility.
Okay. Thank you.
Pastor West, you got anything?
Yes. First of all, excellent presentation. And I was getting a little nervous on the email. It said big cap, and then you added the T. So I was like, please the Lord.
Big liar. That's what I said. I thought the same thing. You said big liar. Come on now. Come on, Pastor. I said, Pastor Tina, don't do. Like you say in Louisiana, don't do me that. Don't do me that.
She had you big cap. I said, oh man, and he's a police officer. Lord have mercy. Thank you for the tea.
Thank you for the
But I appreciate
some people got Pastor West, some people got that. So others it just kind of
yes, but excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I kind of want to piggyback on Pastor Hughes, just about the question he had, and you kind of answered it about basically kind of like a template, something that we can do to kind of get us started to see the holes in our system, see some of the things we need to work on before we are able to actually, get you to come in and do a presentation for us and train our staff. So you kind of answered that question that I had.
So, and I'll tell you, Pastor West and Pastor Hughes, I am in Nashville all the time. Part of my responsibilities is Nashville. And I'll be more than happy to set up a time to come and look at your churches, prior to doing a presentation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Like he did with mine, just one
Like I did with right.
All right. Well, that concludes our program for today. Again, Officer Scott, we just want to thank you for setting aside the time to give us this necessary information. Yes, we want to be prayed up, but we also want to be practical. And so this presentation was very much needed. We didn't know that all these things were going to take place in the country when we put this on the calendar. So this was definitely went from a good idea to a God idea. Can I get a witness out there? So
Amen.
Come on, say that, Pastor. Say that.
Might be the only preaching I've done today. All right. Well, this concludes our service, our program on this evening. Y'all don't go anywhere, but I want to wish the rest of you all a very happy Sabbath.